name is Philip Miller. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the SGA here, I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Student Government Association here at Thomas Nelson. Black History Month is an annual observance in the month of February. It celebrates the past and present achievements of African Americans here in America. The remembrance was established in this country in 1926 by United States historian Carter G. Woodson. It began as the Negro History Week, and over time grew into the month-long celebration that we now observe. I'm pleased to introduce this evening's speakers, who are sure to uplift your spirits as they recount their story of succeeding against the odds in a presentation entitled From Thomas Nelson Community College to Success in the Corporate World. I'm pleased, I already said that, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm TNCC welcome to Mr. Kenneth and Mrs. Thomasina Wright.
Thank you. Thank you for that very nice introduction. Thank all of you for coming, and we're honored to have the Wrights with us this evening. I met Kenny Wright a couple of years ago, but only learned in the last year that he is an alumnus of Thomas Nelson Community College. And as I got to know him better, I learned that Mrs. Wright, Thomasina, is also an alumna of Thomas Nelson. And we're making a real effort to try to get to know our alums, and there are thousands, a lot of them right here in our own backyard. And Thomasina and Kenny are among our most distinguished alums, not just because of what they've accomplished both before and during their time at Thomas Nelson, but because they're just outstanding human beings, and we're truly honored to have both of them. We thought it would be good for a lot of us who don't know their story to hear from them directly about how they came to be where they are, what role Thomas Nelson played in their professional and personal development, and how their testimony can be useful to others who are plotting a similar path towards trying to find their place in society. And so let me just briefly say a little bit about both of them, not as much as I think I could given the time, but currently Thomasina is Aircraft Carriers Program Trade Director at Northrop Grumman Newport News, a position she's held since 1999. She has 10 people who report to her directly, and she supervises a workforce of about 2,000. No small potatoes. After earning her associate degree here in engineering technology, she went on to Old Dominion, where she earned a baccalaureate degree, and then on to the College of William & Mary, where she earned a Master of Business Administration degree. Clearly no intellectual slouch, but also a person who holds a very substantial position at the world's only manufacturer of nuclear-powered carriers in the world. And her husband, Kenneth Wright, earned his associate's degree here as well, also went on to Old Dominion, where he earned a baccalaureate degree in engineering, and founded Wright's Engineering and Design in Portsmouth, a major player in the shipbuilding, design, and repair business, and he too worked at Northrop Grumman before he launched his own business. The last time I saw Kenny, back in the fall, we were at a political event, and he had his lovely daughters with him, And I said, "Where is Thomasina?" And he said, "Well, she's at the office, working on my books." And so, despite the fact that they both have very busy careers, they both are parents, she finds time to help him in his business, which is, I think, another marvelous story. And so, let me stop here. I could say more. Obviously, they contribute a lot to the communities that they are involved in, mainly in Portsmouth, where they're both natives. And they're active in a number of civic organizations and do a lot of good in this community. And so, without further ado, I'd like to present to you Thomasina and Kenny Wright. Please give them a warm welcome from Thomas Nelson. I thought we'd begin by just asking Thomasina to tell us what Thomas Nelson has meant to her, how it helped her launch her career, and what advice she has for anyone who is trying to go to college part-time, trying to raise a family, and trying to start a career. Thomasina?
Well, I want to at least say that growing up in Portsmouth, parents, one of a high school graduate and one that didn't complete high school, I didn't know community colleges existed. My two older sisters did finish high school and end up at Norfolk State University, and I saw my parents struggle during that time period just to make tuition for those two individuals. And during high school, I realized that the love for math and science I couldn't focus on anything. So I went to the apprentice school and I found out about the apprentice school and I started working at Newport Shipbuilding at that time, now known as Northrop Grumman Newport News. And that's where the introduction to engineering and the community college atmosphere was introduced to me. It's interesting. Doing high school, even when I graduated in 1983, the guidance counselors really didn't guide minority females into any type of engineering or science tracks. And for me to take the initiative to get involved at the apprentice school and then realizing that the credits that I earned at the apprentice school transferred to a community college to even get a 2-year degree was just amazing for me. My mom says now, when I first started off in the apprentice school and then eventually ended up at Thomas Nelson, she says, where are you going with this? And she even asked the question, what is engineering? So it was an education on my parents' part, my part, but Thomas Nelson kind of helped me bring the love for math and science to a focused approach, and engineering was the focus. Of course, from there, I transferred to Old Dominion University, and from there to the great College of William and Mary. So it laid the foundation for me. It provided me the focus. It also allowed me to be a multitasker to the point where he talked about my 4 girls and working with Ken's books. It allows me better time management, working full-time and, of course, going part-time at night here at Thomas Nelson. Ken and I, when we were thinking about what we were going to say when we came here, we thought back on our days here at Thomas Nelson and realized that one of the memorable moments was the cafeteria and the microwave, and where we ate dinner every night for at least 4 nights out of the week. So it was a foundation. It built the future for me, and it allowed me to multitask, which of course now I'm juggling more than just work and school. I'm juggling 4 schools and 2 jobs, in Northrop Grumman as well as at Ken's office. So it's been memorable for sure.
Thank you. Ken?
Well, First, let me say thank you for inviting me, and I really appreciate this, and we really enjoy talking about ourselves and all of the folks that had a lot to do with us getting where we were, and I mean that in a real sense, because when I came over to the shipyard, it was my father who always instilled that you need to go to the apprentice school. Now, I'm from a family of 9. I was number 6. I was the first to graduate from high school and later the first to graduate from college. But I was from a working class family that my father was in World War II. He, after the war, went into the Navy Yard, worked there, and he saw the apprentice boys. And growing up, all I ever heard Daddy talk about was going to apprentice school and things like that. So anyway, that steered me to the apprenticeship. The thing that I like about Thomas Nelson is the relationship that they had with the apprentice program. Because I had no idea there was a Thomas Nelson just like Thomasina. And in the apprentice school, once you complete the basic courses, they have advanced courses. And back in that time, the advanced courses were taught by these professors from this place called Thomas Nelson. So being the guy who I was, I'd always want to pick and find out, who are you, what do you do? Because I never thought I was college material. And getting to talk to some of those professors and coming over and seeing the relationship that was already, the groundwork was already laid with Northrop Grumman to Thomas Nelson. It was a smooth transition. So I came over and I felt like I knew the place because the professors used to come over in the shipyard to teach the courses. And so naturally, being in the engineering curriculum, you got to see some of those same folks, and it kind of made you feel like you were a part of the place. And then when I got here and saw the relationship between Thomas Nelson and Old Dominion, I mean, it was all laid out. And so there were a lot of people that put that type of infrastructure in place for kids like myself that had no idea what track I wanted. I knew I wanted to do something. I knew I liked math. I didn't have a lot of role models in those fields. Working in the shipyard, and I think the cream of the crop was when I actually came over, we took classes at night. And there were professors here, or adjunct professors, that taught over at NASA and different industrial places. And you have no idea what it is to a kid when you've got a teacher that has done it. He talks the practical sense. And when you're doing and working problems, the practical part is always amazing. I mean, I'm not against theory. I mean, a lot of folks love theoretical things, a lot of professors, and I gotta tell you, I hope there's no Old Dominion folks over here, but the professors that we had here were head and shoulders above. Most of those guys were theory folks that had PhDs and it was, the relationship was there. And I remember there was a metallurgical lab here, and there was an older gentleman named Barlow that taught it, and I always felt comfortable around him and in that lab. And we had steel things. We do all different types of projects with finding all the different chemical makeups of steel. And here I am working in the shipyard, and I'm over here at night, and this guy's explaining what I'm doing at work, and you have no idea what that does to tie all that in and make you feel like you just, it was unreal. And I thought when I graduated from here and went to Old Dominion, I was going to have those same type of guys. And we did have one professor that was over in the wind tunnel lab over at NASA that was over at Old Dominion. And again, I didn't know the relationship that Thomas Nelson had with the adjunct professors, what you did to recruit those type of folks, but it makes a big difference when people relate to you. And because all during my studies, I always felt there was no way I could be an engineer. I didn't know what they were looking for me to do when I was done. I got so nervous when I got so close to graduation because I thought somebody was going to ask me how to figure or do something, and I was afraid. I really was, and I never told anybody. And I told one of my teachers, there was a Dr. Frank, I can't remember, he was a dynamics teacher here. And I went to his office and I told him that, and he looked at me and laughed and said, "You're going to go far." I'm like, "But what if somebody asked me what do I do?" So anyway, it was great. But the point I'm trying to make is the relationship and the work that Thomas Nelson did with a Northrop Grumman and an apprentice program, because there's a huge amount of students and kids that come through these type of programs that could lead right into here. When we came here, there was a lot of classes we didn't have to take. They had already recognized a lot of lab and things that we had done already over in the apprentice school. So they knew about our program, and I'm telling you, it's extremely comfortable when you come somewhere and folks understand where you came from and what you're doing. So Thomas Nelson was extremely important for us. I mean, we had just married, we just graduated from the apprentice school, and coming here every night, and I think we're here from 5:30 to 10 at night, and we did that about 4 nights a week. I mean, we worked full time.
And still living in Portsmouth.
And still lived in
So it's
Portsmouth.
an hour drive home.
So it was commitment. It really was. But again, I was just talking to one of the vice presidents there about the best kept secret, and she said, "Someone heard that? We don't want to be the best kept secret," and it really was, and it's amazing. So in our journeys, and we talk a lot. I do a lot on the high school level. And talking to kids, I'm always talking about community college. I'm always talking about Thomas Nelson and some of the things, because there are so many of us that are brought up to believe that there's only one track to success, and there's a lot of kids that need to see it a different way, feel it a different way, just do different types of things. And I never felt uncomfortable on this campus, and we were here, and it was amazing. We both said the cafeteria was the first thing that came out. Man, it's been 22 years now, and the fact that we did it together, and that was where we did most of our homework and study. And I think we had a couple of study groups here from other shipyard apprentices that were here. And so it was delightful. It really was. And when we went to Old Dominion, I got to tell you, those folks were looking at me, and both of us like we were geniuses, and I kept looking like us. We had no idea what we had gone through by going to the apprentice school and coming to Thomas Nelson and having all that. And when we got there, we had a great deal of respect, I think, from most of our professors, especially the ones in the materials and technology and laboratories and stuff, because we were very comfortable in there and very comfortable working and doing hands-on stuff, which is some of the things you learn through an apprenticeship and coming here. So we were tickled to death. I didn't realize it at the time, but Thomas Nelson played a huge role. One of the biggest things Thomas Nelson did for my career is right after we graduated from the apprentice school, Northrop Grumman was going through a downsizing. They had almost 30,000 employees. Ronald Reagan wanted to build a 600-ship Navy. We were all in favor of that. And they had a layoff, which was the first thing. We'd never had that in the history of the company and all that. Well, they took some of us design apprentices and moved us down into the shipyard and in the waterfront. And so I got one of those dirty jobs which we could do, and I did well because I had that apprenticeship experience. About a year later, they found out that I was a student at Thomas Nelson in design and was looking for some young designers. And so I still remember my boss calling me and saying, "Hey, they want to see you over in Human Resources." That's what they do. And they asked me, "You at Thomas Nelson?" and all, and I was like, "Yeah." And I still today think, because I was at Thomas Nelson and they were recruiting young designers, it helped me go from that place to the other. So it's amazing the things you don't realize is going on in your life when we're working and going to school and doing things that you ought to be doing, that other people are looking at you and mapping out your progress and seeing how you're doing. So I attribute Thomas Nelson to helping me get that design job and being back up in the office, because
He needs some time on it.
I do need a time. But thanks for asking.
Well, let me ask you, Thomas, that's an interesting story. Tell us how you ended up in the position you currently have, and what encouraged you or motivated you to think about getting an MBA.
And when I finished over at Old Dominion with the engineering degree, and I realized, actually did a co-op program with Northrop Grumman during that time period when I was at Old Dominion, and I worked a couple of summers in some engineering departments over at the shipyard. And at that point, I realized I didn't want to be an engineer. And it goes back to Ken's comments in the sense that, engineers are kind of unique individuals and mostly introverts in the sense that they keep, real quiet and kind of close to themselves, not a lot of interpersonal skills. And, doing that tenure as a co-op student, I realized that they had, minimum regards to the guy on the deck plate or the guy that's working with their hands or, their hands-on individual. And I realized during that time period that when I do get my engineering degree, that my future aspirations would be come back and be their bosses. And I realized at that point that I had to, of course, further my education, take the business route and understand the business in order to, launch from an engineer to either engineering supervisor. And I actually ended up in the operation and management side of the business. So it's understanding the individuals and making sure that you can lead them to where they need to go and get them to change their perspective of how they see and view other groups of people that kind of inspire me to kind of say, hey, I can do this. And that's when my mom says I never stopped going to school, because as soon as I finished my bachelor's degree at Old Dominion, I enrolled, took the GMAT in order to get into graduate school at William & Mary, and started like a semester later right at William & Mary. Same scenario, part-time at night, finished in about 3.5 years. Halfway through the program, I'm calling Ken's like, I'm tired of going to school. When is this going to be over? And he's, the words of encouragement, you're halfway there, don't give up. You'll reap it at the end, continue on. And, we persevered through and definitely made it. And of course, everyone said we're successful. We're just people that get up every morning, go to work, and make sure that our kids are getting the right education that needs to get done. So, if that's what you deem as success, I think we're pretty successful.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Well, Ken, tell us, you worked after you finished for Northrop Grumman, and tell us what you did, and then how you came to run your own business.
Well, my motivation was easy. It was money. Coming from a family of 9, I love to tell the story about I really enjoyed when I was a kid becoming a fat, chubby kid, because we used to get hand-me-down clothes, and I had to wear all my other brothers' clothes. So when I become a chubby size, and none of my other brothers were chubby, Mom had to take me to Sears and get me my own clothes. So when I finished at Old Dominion, Northrop Grumman had, or Newport Ship at that time, they offered me a career in 2 different tracks. One was in the operations side on the waterfront and project management, and the other one was in engineering. Now, I love engineering. I love figuring out things. I like to say this is going to happen, and if it doesn't happen, I don't mind staying up all night trying to figure out why it didn't happen, because it was supposed to happen. And so that's in my nature. And I think the engineering position was $32,000 and the project management was $34,000. So at the drop of a hat, I told the guy, I love project management. And so, so if that kind of got me in the field of working with the folks out in the yard, being more of a program manager, managing people, managing departments, doing scheduling and things of that nature, and it really was a good fit for me, and I didn't understand it. And at the time, a lot of my coworkers were asking, why would the engineer, why do you want to come down here? And I didn't know why. I didn't want to tell them, because it was $2,000 more than going on the engineer track. And so that led me into the project management, and I did that over at Northrop Grumman for about 8 years. And I finished up the last program that I was working on, and I was given an opportunity to go up in engineering to be an engineering supervisor, and I had started kind of there in the design loft department, and I knew a lot of the folks in there, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to work that side of the fence. So I went back up into engineering, and I was an engineering supervisor, working about, I think I had an average of about 30 folks. And the good thing was about half of them knew me. They saw me grow up in the shipyard, saw me go and do all these different things. And it was a real easy transition having people that respected you because of the way you came up and how you came back to the engineering department. So that was a pretty interesting task. But the management piece of that and dealing with the project management and dealing with subcontractors and interfacing with other people other than Newport News gave me my first glimpse at me starting my own business and trying to do this. And it was a difficult decision because, you know, you've done something all your life. You've been extremely successful. I think I was 36 years old. Yes, because my company now is 10 years old this month. And I'm 46 years old. So I was 36 years old. And we had the conversation about leaving, starting my business, doing all these things, staying up all night, talking about what if it don't work, and she'll tell you I'm the consummate figuring everything out to the nth degree. I'll talk myself into something and then talk myself out of it. And so we went through quite a bit of that, and we decided that I should leave and start my own business. And I got to tell you, the motivation of wanting to be successful, wanting to tie my name to something that people could say, hey, I remember when that guy was a kid, he came over here, he was a apprentice boy, or he was here at Thomas Nelson, and doing it in my hometown of Portsmouth, and hiring people there, and doing business over there, over in the Navy Yard. At that time, I had no dealings with Norfolk Naval Yard. All I knew was Newport News and their way of doing things. So it was interesting, and I got to find that I was a pretty good business owner, even though I wasn't as good in the management side of the finances. My wife is that Women Murray piece really helped us out because we go off to different things and talking about businesses and dealing with banks and what the bank wants to see from you. It was a whole different world for me. And I remember when I built my facility in Portsmouth, it was about $2 million, and they wanted a life insurance policy over me. And she's sitting there going, why do you look like you're freaking out? I said, what's my life got to do with this deal? She says, you're going in business. These people giving you $2 million. You better believe they want all of those things. So all of that was a whole new world. But because we had persevered and did all of these other things, it became easy for both of us. And the things that I weren't very good at, she was. And it was just a good fit. And we look back at it 10 years later, and I'm tickled to death. We've enjoyed what we do. I really enjoy going and talking to people. We do a lot of this in high schools and in elementary schools, talking to kids about being an engineer and things of that nature. But going and taking that $2,000 a year extra job in project management probably was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it got me away from engineering, which is what I thought I loved, and got me on a different track and more of the management, and everything's not about the X's and O's, and I've always been an X and O guy, and so that's kind of how I migrated into it. But the project management piece and seeing other companies come into the shipyard and do work, and at one time I was signing off on invoices that, yeah, this company did this amount of work, and start seeing the dollars that these guys was making. It doesn't take long for you to figure out how can I do this. So, but yeah, it's been a real blessing.
That's good. That's good. Let me ask you, what advice do you speak to a lot of high school students, and what do you tell them? What advice do you have for young people who, like yourself, might not have known beforehand what a community college is, what it has to offer?
I would recommend, especially to high school students, is to go to your guidance counselors and, ask the questions, ask what are the other options, ask what if I can't get into a regular four-year university, what are those other options, whether it's an apprentice school, whether it's a community college. There's a lot of opportunities. My 12-year-old daughter is here. We just attended a college fair actually up at William and Mary, and part of their admission discussion, they had a admissions workshop, and one of the part of that discussion, they said that they actually saved a certain number of slots for admissions for community college applicants. So that it's a good segue into getting into a four-year college that coming out of high school you normally wouldn't go in, you wouldn't normally get accepted to because of the admissions criteria is so high. I mean, Ken and I can tell you that my grades in high school were much better than Ken's. And I probably could have gotten into a four-year college. But Thomas Nelson provides you that segue, the alternate track to eventually reach your ultimate goal. And you have to go seek out the information if it's not forthcoming, and it allows get the guidance counselors involved to support that initiative.
Let me add one thing to that. One of the other things that I found interesting when I was in engineering and in the shipyard was those first 2 years of your college years are extremely important. And most kids that go off to college and have first time on their own, away from parents, if you're not disciplined and get all of your A game in place, you can screw up real bad. In the shipyard, I ran into a lot of these kids that went to tech, and it was 2 years and they were in the shipyard, and I didn't find the correlation between why after 2 years they come back and they're in the shipyard, they didn't graduate. And that's when I found out you have to declare a major. And for the first 2 years, a lot of them didn't do the things that they needed to do and couldn't declare that major. And coming to a community college and being focused and knowing what it is you need to do allows you to bypass those first 2 years, which I think were extremely important in a college life. And a lot of kids that go away from home and do those things, you hear all kinds of horror stories. And I do it now when I go out and talk about a lot of kids why you transfer from here. Those first 2 years are crucial. And we see a lot of parents now starting to bring their kids here, closer to home, to make sure that's a good transition, because there are a huge amount of people that don't make it in college because mom or dad or someone thought you needed to go off 3,000 miles away to somewhere and the kid couldn't handle it or couldn't handle the atmosphere. So those first 2 years are extremely critical, and we had none of those experiences. So when I heard those stories from these other guys, I couldn't relate. I was like, well, what did you do your first year? Oh, we hung out at the body shop. Where's the body shop? Oh, it wasn't on campus. It was somewhere else. So those first 2 years are critical. And if you're a parent with a kid here, and I see one of my employees is here, a lady that I think dearly of, and her daughter is a student here. Can you wave back there? We were talking about that, and I said, you better come. I'm going to be talking. I want your daughter to be here. She's a student here at Thomas Nelson and doing extremely well. And we were talking, I think, at the Christmas party about that transition and coming to Thomas Nelson and being able to get those 2 years out of the way, understand what it is you need and want to do, and if it's not what you want, there are people here that can help steer you in the right direction to do that. So those first 2 years are critical, and a lot of kids that don't make it in four-year colleges is because of that freshman and sophomore year where they didn't probably do the right thing. It was more of being away from mom and dad and on my own, and only the kids that had the right discipline to do that persevered in that area. So I thought that was extremely critical here that we offer here.
Put both of you on the spot and ask you to just say a little bit about how much of what you've accomplished has been during your marriage, and how you've been able to manage a career and raise a family and support each other's career development.
You give it to me first.
Well,
So lot of flexibility. I've learned over, Ken and I actually celebrated our 23rd anniversary this past Christmas Eve, and it was and through that, you know, I own a lot of it up to the fact that we do have common interests, we do have common goals, and you know, we are both flexible. I mean, Ken and I are in lots of organizations, a lot of civic as well as professional organizations, and we play off of each other. You know, he mentioned about my business sense and his hands-on sense, but we know, you know, when we're in different forums, who's the, I should say, the aggressor and who is the passer, and it's been interesting over the years how we know in the different forums which role that we actually play. And that's key because being a African American female in a dominant white male industry as shipbuilding is, it's key to allow them to realize that I do have, you know, a family as well as a very supportive husband. So it's key to know what form you're in and what role you actually play. The family, we have a great support system. I mean, my parents still live in Portsmouth. Ken's mom is still there. I have, you know, supportive sisters and friends and family that allows us to work and support the kids and support the activities that they're in. You know, Ken, we've often have to, you know, sit down on a Sunday night and say, okay, what's the game plan for this upcoming week? Who has baseball? I mean, who has basketball? Who has soccer? Who has Girl Scouts? And, you know, try to juggle our schedules to make sure that our kids are well-rounded and in activities to support either from a community standpoint or just a cultural environment. So we make sure that they are exposed to different things, and we make sure that we can juggle our schedules to support those activities as well. So it's been a give and take relationship. You know, we, as any couple have, we have fights, we have battles, we have discussions. Some talk louder than others, but, you know, we work through it and we realize that it's for the betterment, for the ultimate goal. And we, you know, we both see have the eyes on the prize.
Let me say, I've been accused of being extremely paranoid through our relationship, and I've always been an extremely protective person of my wife, because being in a place like the shipyard, and you see that all the guys are accepted, and you see the women, and it just seemed like this was been 30 years ago, that it was difficult, and she always got questioned about, why are you in the shipyard, why are you here, and those types of things, and it always bothered me. And being one of those guys, you don't realize that until you have a partner or somebody that you love that are in those environments, and you're like, man, this got to be tough with her being in that environment. And whenever we went places, people would automatically come to the guy to start talking. I'm like, whoa, there's the boss over there. So, and we had this real good stint with Thomas Center got promoted to a government relations job, being a lobbyist for Northrop Grumman. At that time, it was Tenneco. And it was amazing because I've always been this political, I loved it. I was a CNN baby. I grew up knowing all these guys, and she said, I'm going to Washington. I'm like, you going where? And so for the first time, she was actually up in Washington dealing with congressmen and senators and explaining about the shipyard, what we do, how important the carrier program is, why we need your support, why we need to build another carrier. And there were, you know, up in Washington, there was all of these parties and after parties and things, and she's there. And I never forget, I had to run and buy a tux because there was a black tie affair she was in with, I think, Senator Robb and some other folks, and I'm back here at home, and I'm driving up to D.C. because I didn't realize how important it was that her husband be at that function and be there supporting her, and to watch her mingle and talk to these folks and give these folks an overview of Newport News, Hampton, what we do here, and I'm just sitting there in awe at my wife, and I'm going, I can't believe it. I'm sitting there, he just passed, Murtha. Congressman Murtha up in Pennsylvania, he was in charge of appropriations, I believe, and to watch him talk to my wife, and my wife talking about what we do and the passion she had, I'm telling you, there's no better feeling. You just feel, and I just immediately, it just changed everything. And I'm like, this wasn't what we learned at Thomas Nelson or Old Dominion, and you find all of these other things that once you equip, and the school gives you the tools to be able to do these things. It's amazing the things you can do. And to see my wife up there with those folks and talking about it, I was like, and we finally had to buy me a tux because it was so many of these dinners and things, and she would fly up on Monday morning, Tuesday mornings, and then fly back on Thursdays. And we had no kids, so I'm okay with that. And I'm calling her, whose office you in? Herb Bateman loved her to death. She was a kid, and I don't know how many of you guys know Herb Bateman, but he used to be the father of the shipyard and a good representative, Norm Sisiski. And she's telling me, she's in these guys' office, she's talking, I'm sitting there, we're 27, 28 years old. And, it's just, it puts you in awe, but it does give you this sense of you can do almost anything. I don't know what these people here did for me, but we're prepared to handle anything that come along, and it was just amazing. I mean, the whole shipyard experience with Thomas Nelson, it's amazing the things you can do, and other people respect what you do and where you come from when they find out your story. And there was no shortcuts, it was nothing easy, and I'm telling you, it was extremely interesting to see my wife in action. And I guess the cream on the crop story was we were trying to get some folks to understand how important our aircraft carrier was to the whole country. And they were doing a grassroots lobbying effort and finding all contractors throughout the country that had anything to do with an aircraft carrier. Well, my wife was part of a delegation that took about 10 congresspeople on an aircraft carrier, flew them out there to the whole excitement, flew them out, they landed on one, and then they shot them off on a catapult, and Thomas Saylor was up there, and these guys, they're all guys, and I think it was one lady from North Carolina, the congressman from North Carolina, they were up there, and to have her guiding them and explaining to them how that all worked. Now, I wasn't able to do that, so I'm only picturing in my mind my wife out there with me, and I think she said 2 of the congressmen threw up. And they promised that nobody could talk about it. They had mark bags, and I don't know if you understand when they shoot you off the catapult, that initial jolt and that whole feeling is just, but it gave them an appreciation of what an aircraft carrier capabilities were, how important it was to our national defense, how important it was from a contracting standpoint with, how many states was it?
It was 46 states.
46 states in this country have something to do with the building of an aircraft carrier. And once that was all laid out, and I don't know, I forgot what year or which carrier it was that...
It was actually the USS Ronald Reagan.
The Ronald Reagan, and it was just amazing how bringing that whole thing around. And now tell me what lobbying has to do with Thomas Nelson and all that. I mean, it's just amazing the things that you do when you're equipped with the right tools. And those are some stories. I mean, we can share a lot of them because we've been able to do a lot of things and being a company of a lot of people, and I've even been called an expert. That's scary, but I mean, but people really appreciate and understand what you do and where you come from. But it's extremely important in family to make sure that everybody understands their role. And a lot of times, Thomasino was driving the train, and I had to do my part as the husband and not be the dominant one and do like I'm doing now, all the talking, and to make sure that they understood that she was the person and she was the person they needed to deal with. And so that was also extremely rewarding to see see that whole thing unfold. So I'm tickled to death about that. And like I said, there's some other things that we could share with you. But again, you don't know what's inside of you or how you were able to deal with those things until those things come up. And people ask you about, they think you went off to a 4-year traditional college and you did all those things. And when we start talking about a community college, and Thomas Nelson, and I think I was in Washington one time and mentioned Thomas Nelson to a guy that was working in overseas building operation. He just got in from Egypt. And this guy was a student, and he said he transferred up to Northern Virginia, but he started out here and he worked in the Newport News area when he was in the Navy, I believe. And to be up in Northern Virginia and contracting and talking and have somebody talk about Thomas Nelson or the shipyard and understand where you come from, it just makes you extremely comfortable in the environment you are when you're dealing with people on a professional level. So.
Good. Well, Thomasina may very well be the only alumna who's a registered lobbyist, which is quite an achievement. Well, why don't we open the floor up to questions and see if there's anything that you'd like either Thomasina or Ken to respond to. Anyone?
Alicia?
Yes.
Ken, what is your business exactly?
It's called Wrights Engineering and Design, and we're located in Portsmouth, Virginia, and we do several things. We got a contract with the Navy over at Norfolk Naval Shipyard. I've got a contract with the Department of the Army to manage some warehouses over at Fort Eustis. We've got 3 warehouses over there that we manage, and I have my physical building is located in Portsmouth, where we've got about 40,000 square foot of manufacturing facility where we build foundations and other structural units that go on the aircraft carrier. So, and being small, not to sound like we're some huge elaborate company, but you got to be diverse because business goes up and down, and if you're just in one cycle, so we've done a normal thing. We clean. We'll do anything. I have anything to make people understand that when you come to us, we're going to give you the service that you ask for, and hopefully more, but more importantly, to make sure that they call you back, because repeat business based on your performance is probably the best marketing and advertising you could do. So I take that extremely seriously, and not only do I play the role as the president, I also work. So don't think you're dreaming if you happen to see me on the road either driving one of my trucks. We've got people that don't come to work. We don't have a large company. If I've got to get some products shipped over to Fort Eustis or Newport News, and I'll jump in the truck. And if you want to see my folks look like this, they're used to it now. But when we first started, it was interesting for my employees to see the type of person I was. But I got to tell you, when you're leading by example and people know you don't mind doing whatever it takes, then it's kind of hard for an employee to say, no, I don't want to do this or do that. And one of the bad things about a Northrop Grumman or a big corporation is you get so many folks that are, I'm just a planner, or I'm just a engineer, and all I do is rig, and all I do is that. You get caught up into not doing a lot of cross things, and being a small company, you can't operate like that because you don't have the contracts and the work to do that. So I've got a group of right now we have about 25 employees, and we do those 3 things that we do there. But we're extremely pleased with what we do. And interesting, I'm doing probably 3 segments of what I never thought I was going to do. I thought when I started my business, I was going to be doing pure engineering and pure consulting. And when I first started out, that's what I was doing. I had a couple of companies that hired me to help them with doing some things that they were doing, and it was strictly either planning or creating packages for their companies to work, because a lot of small companies don't have the planning and the IT and all these things that the larger companies have. So someone that can help them bring all that together was a valuable person. So my first 2 years in business, I did that for, actually it was 2 companies right over here on the peninsula that used my services. But I eventually migrated into where I am now because of contracting opportunities. And again, once you're in business and you gotta make payroll and do things, it's hard to turn down any kind of work. And being a small business, we've done it all. Cleaning, what was the worst thing we did? I think we went down into some tanks for the Coast Guard and mucked out some oil because they had a problem and no one could do it, and they wanted to know. They called us, and oh yeah, I'll call my oil division. And me and 3 or 4 other guys went over there, right, and we went and hired a barge and a few pumps, and we pumped out the oil, we got it out, we mucked the thing down, and I still get this Coast Guard guy called me. This has been 10 years ago, and they want to know if we're still in the tank cleaning business. And fortunate enough, we don't have to do that now. But again, some of the challenges and things that you don't expect, but when you're in business and you make a commitment that I want to make this work, you do whatever it takes to get to where your ultimate goal is. But thanks for the question. Anybody else?
Ken, what percentage of your business would you say have come through you and started business enterprise?
That's a very good question. Actually, I am an 8A contractor, and I've been somewhat disappointed in that because that program has not worked as well as I think the government intended it to work. But probably about 40% of the work comes from being a minority that they have to do work with a certain amount of minorities. But that whole thing gets muddy with people having spin-off companies and finding someone that's got an Eskimo blood in his lifeblood and qualifying for that type of thing. But about 40%. We've been real good at doing work that we bid and outbid on just about everything we do. And so there are guys that they have no idea I'm a minority company when I'm sending in prices, even though they may have it on their roll, you know, in your purchasing departments and all. But we haven't maximized that program as well as I'd like to have done it. But again, you don't go in things saying, I'm hoping to get all this work just because I'm black or because I'm female. Those people are never going to succeed when you're looking for something just because of those things. We take great pride when people call and say, man, that guy, you know, he's got one hell of a tank cleaning division, you know. You take great pride in that. You don't want to tell them, no, we're not tank cleaners. But the fact that people appreciate what you do and the good work that you do. And I'm a very difficult person at times to work for when I've got an employee that doesn't understand how important that is. Because that just keeps the money and keeps the cash flow coming, and you know, you really want that repeat business. And so, not as well as I'd like on the minority piece, but that's another story. But thanks for the question.